Penn State is 7-0 after a 28-13 win over Wisconsin at Camp Randall. The Nittany Lions overcame injuries and a slow start in the first half to remain ranked number 3 in the nation. We discuss the win and look ahead to the showdown next week against Ohio State. Nittany Nation Overtime is next.
The money is talking, I'm flowing, it's coming in just how I drew it. Yeah, you know what it is. Hey, we doing it big. Look up, there's no limit, no, we cannot settle for this. Yeah, can't stop, nah, won't stop. Yeah, spin on live, you don't believe it, just watch.
Welcome into another edition of Nittany Nation Overtime. I'm your host, Ryan Risky, and I'm joined by the Nitwits, as always, Mark Brennan, Rudel, and former Nittany Lion defensive coordinator Tom Bradley. And guys, another win, Penn State 7-0, but we don't know the status of Drew Allar. Pula comes in during the second half and plays really well and gets Penn State the win.
Yeah, you know, I think Bo's the story of the game. You know, you see so many kids that are jumping into the transfer portal, backup quarterbacks, and finding their next stop. But he has stuck with Penn State. They really found ways to play to his strengths. And, there's some question of where Allar, we'll get to that, where he'll be. But I think the quarterback position got stronger this past weekend because he did a good job on the road, helped bring them back.
Yeah, I'm sure the coaching staff had confidence in Pula, and I'm sure Pula had confidence in himself. But you don't know until you get into that heated situation how a kid's going to perform. And to his credit, he did an unbelievable job. He wasn't fazed in the slightest. So I think that position is better now. And listen, when you look around college football and you see how much people are getting banged up, we saw it obviously with Penn State this weekend. A guy like Drew Allar, as important as he was, they were able to overcome, and Pula was able to get it done. I also like the fact, and Tom, you could probably speak to this, a different kind of quarterback, but they adjusted their game plan on the fly, and I thought that was really important.
I think it was really important offensively. They did adjust their game plan, but I felt bad for Wisconsin because they did not prepare. They were not ready for Bo, and I'm sure they didn't know what he could do with his legs. That's not what they were ready for. So for them, it was like, I'm thinking, boy, you're the coordinator. You better shift your gears real fast because he's a different guy than what was back there. And he came in and did I thought he just played great in the game. I really did.
Yeah, he's generally been a guy they've put in as a change of pace runner, but he was 11-13. And, it was just so good to see that because a kid gets pigeonholed as sort of a guy. Now, he set up a lot of other plays. The running game was better when he was in there, actually.
Well, yeah, they have to be more honest, right? And again, that's
but
something.
I mean, the backs did better.
Right, but I don't want to be the guy talking about it. Tom should be the guy. But no, seriously, you're a defensive coordinator. How difficult is it?
You had to change quickly what you wanted to do because your game plan, they were not ready for Bo.
But how does he make the running backs better?
Well, because you have to account for him.
Right.
He's someone you really have to account for. That he can do a lot of different things. And the other thing that happens too, you got to account for. You forget is, a lot of times, lanes just aren't for cars. So you get your pass rush lanes. Yeah. With him, you better be careful what you're doing because if he gets out, he's a handful out there in the perimeter.
And one thing we're seeing is the benefit of all the meaningful snaps that Pula has gotten with the first team offense over the past couple of years because he definitely looked ready to play.
Yeah, and the fact that they once again had to come back, they were in a situation where at USC, this is now 2 road games in a row where they've, been down and, the team rallied around him, didn't panic. All these injuries are adding up, so I think that is a sidebar to what's coming with the Ohio State game. Penn State's going to have to continue to find ways. So far, their recruiting and their depth have really paid off.
Yeah, one thing I'd like to throw out there, remember, you're only allowed to have one of those communication helmets on the field at a time, and Allar was always the guy who had this, so outside of maybe mop-up duty. So for him to go in and deal with that end of it too, it's not just the passing and running and handing off. He's got to control that huddle. He's got to take what he's hearing up until 15 seconds left to go on the play clock or on the countdown clock, and get that across. And that was really smooth. I thought he did a great job of that as well.
He did. Here's the thing, too, about Ohio State. Now they have to guess what they got in their arsenal with him. So now when you only got so much time to practice, and you better start saying, okay, what can he do? Oh, we got to have a little different game plan. So that's going to make it a little bit interesting.
And one thing, with James Franklin and the way that they don't disclose any injuries, we're not going to know if Allar is playing most likely up until the starters are announced before kickoff.
Well, to everybody but the halftime reporter, apparently, because he said that he had mentioned what was going to happen. But that brings up a good point, Ryan. They also did well without Dani Dennis-Sutton and without Donko, two starters, one on offense and one on defense. So as much as you focus on Allar, and rightfully so, those are two pretty key guys, and I think it speaks to the depth and how important that is for this team, not just for now, but if they're lucky enough to get into that playoff or good enough to get into the playoff, as many games as you're piling up, as many injuries as you're piling up, the depth is huge.
And right now they really control their destiny. You looked at the USC and at Wisconsin, and then this coming week against Ohio State is probably their 3 toughest games, and that was all the same for the 3-game stretch right there. And right now they've won 2 of them. So, they're looking at possibly the first 1-loss or 0-loss regular season of James Franklin's tenure.
Yep, and this is the one they have to get over, though. Not so much to get into the playoff, but just I think to really make everybody feel like the program has arrived. Ohio State is the benchmark. The last coach to win there, right?
They're going to be fine this week's my prediction, okay? I think they've got a heck of a good football team. I think it's a national championship caliber football team, and I like the way they're playing football right now.
2 top 5 teams in Happy Valley this coming weekend. We do have to take a quick break, but we're going to continue talking about the magnitude of this matchup and how the defense played against Wisconsin. Don't go anywhere. Nittany Nation Overtime will return.
You're watching Nittany Nation Overtime.
Welcome back into Nittany Nation Overtime. Ryan Risky, Mark Brennan, Neil Rudel, and former Penn State defensive coordinator Tom Bradley. And guys, the defense, once again, they stepped up in that second half. And I'm going to be honest, I was kind of starting to get some vibes from the 2021 Iowa game when they struggled moving the ball at the start of the second half after Allar came out with an injury. But then Jalen Reed comes with that huge pick 6.
Yeah, play of the game, really. I thought the defense really kept Penn State in the game in a lot of ways. Penn State was rolling up a lot of stats. I think clearly looked like the better team, and yet here they are. They had 1 offensive touchdown going into the fourth quarter. So, it's 10-7, it's 14-13, and, this defense has not allowed a touchdown in the third quarter all year.
Tom, I'd like to get your opinion on the safeties for Penn State and the job that they're doing, even without KJ Winston. To me, you've coached some really good safeties, and you've coached safeties who have actually led the team in tackles. A guy like Jalen Reed, how valuable is he to what they're doing?
Well, that's a great point you brought up with those safeties. When they're, a lot of times you sit and go, boy, those safeties are making too many tackles,
right,
but they're doing a great job. You got to give Terry Smith some credit. Terry's doing a great job. And I'm not saying that just because I recruited Terry out of high school. Terry's done a great job with that secondary. He really has. And you got to give him a lot of credit the way they're playing right now. And one of the things about what you brought up, those safeties, they don't miss many tackles either. Right. That's a really good tackling group back there. The whole secondary is a good tackling group.
Yeah, James has repeatedly praised Terry and calls him like the best, cornerback coach or so in the country. And
And Anthony Poindexter's doing a good job back there too. He works kind of hand in hand with safety. The thing that I liked about Jalen Reed is when you're up there in the press box, you see it a little bit different, and you could see him sneaking up on that interception, and I'm like, he's dropping back on this. You could tell. And I think just because we all watch him so much, and obviously the quarterback didn't realize what he was going to do, but to see him have that versatility where in one game he's sacking the quarterback, in another game he's dropping back and picking that pass off, just unbelievable versatility.
Yeah, Wheatley had 10 tackles also back there.
And we saw how the way that both sides of the ball were able to feed off of that momentum after the pick 6. It just kind of looked like some more life was ignited into the team.
Well, one of the things I like to do a stat. Whenever you get a pick 6, how many times you've lost a game when you've got a pick 6? I'd really like to see the percentage of that one.
I remember
Not
you guys.
too many.
Not too many.
When you guys played
Not too
West
many.
Virginia once, and I think Darren Perry had a pick 6 early in the game. And I remember after the game, Joe was like, "Sometimes you have to be careful because if something like that happens too early in the game, you think it's going too easy." But that one was like, at the one at Wisconsin, complete momentum changer.
And it was just one of those things where, the offense was struggling to move the ball. I think it was pretty clear Allar wasn't going to be coming back. And Wisconsin did a good enough job moving the ball themselves. Like, they weren't getting big plays. They were getting some chunk yards, and that's how they were able to put up the points that they did up until that time. Except then they didn't score again after that.
They really need to evaluate their operation on offense. I mean, come on. And if you are a defensive team, do you really want to throw it from 3rd and 14 from your own end zone over the middle to Jalen Reed? It was like, what did they really want to do? They finally made a pass to get down to the 15-yard line, and then they ran it into the line twice and kicked a field goal. They took no real chances. They ate 3 timeouts at halftime. I'm not sure he really trusts his quarterback in any way.
No, it doesn't look that way. The other thing, too, is, it's one of the great places to play.
Yeah,
Camp Randall is football. They got great fans. It's a really great venue. And to go in there and beat them, because it's noisy there. They get into
Well,
it.
I thought the USC win was the best win overall, but in terms of going into an adverse environment, it's like night and day. I mean, nothing against USC, but that's not a Big Ten environment. And to go into Camp Randall, those fans are great fans, and they were really into it. And that's why I love the fact that you had so many guys who, Nolan Rucci goes out there. Nobody's even talking about that. He was at Wisconsin last year. He's forced to play the entire second half at tackle, does a really nice job. So it wasn't just Bo Pribula. They had some other young guys step up in a hostile environment, and I think that bodes well for the rest of the season.
Right, definitely a lot to like. And one thing I know we wanted to touch on a little bit was after the game, I'm sure everybody saw, what happened at practice with James Franklin being asked questions about 2 former players who were dismissed from the program. He went out of his way to apologize for the way he acted on Wednesday when he was walking away.
Yeah, and I think he clearly slipped up on Wednesday. That was not well handled. And he brought it up himself. And I thought that said a lot for him to offer an apology. I was glad to see it and glad that they are moving past it, certainly going into this week.
I thought it was a really classy gesture by him, too.
Well, and I thought it was good that he apologized to the media, but he had to feel bad about the way that reflected on his SID staff. They're hardworking people. I don't think they deserve to be thrown into the fire like that, and I'm glad that everything got some form of resolution. I think it was a classy way all around to handle something that was obviously a difficult situation.
All right, yep, and as you said, nice to have closure on that. Anyways, we do have to take another break, but when we come back, we're going to look at the college football playoff picture. Don't go anywhere.
You're watching Nittany Nation Overtime.
Welcome back into Nittany Nation Overtime. Ryan Risky, Mark Brennan, Neil Rudel, and former Penn State defensive coordinator Tom Bradley. And guys, 7-0, Penn State looks like they pretty much now control their own destiny getting into the college football playoff.
Yeah, I mean, barring a collapse, and I do think the Minnesota game out there could be a danger spot. I mean, they rolled over Maryland, but they are capable, and you know kind of whether you're going to get up there later in the season. So, yeah, barring a collapse, they should at least be in, even if they lose to Ohio State.
The irony is that this is the year you could afford to lose to Ohio State, and I mean, I still think it's important that they beat this team just to show that you get over that proverbial hump. I mean, there's a great chance you're going to be in a playoff, but do you want to get there, with the expanded field, not beating the team that everybody wants you to beat? So I think that's, while technically this may not be a do-or-die game, I just think it's very important for them to get past that kind of stigma of not being able to beat this team.
And it would also be a great way for them to finally change the narrative surrounding them when they play top 10 ranked teams.
Well, I'll tell you what, it doesn't matter. They want to beat everybody on that schedule.
Right.
You guys brought up Minnesota. I'm laughing because now I forgot they don't play in the dome anymore. So that weather.
Right.
You guys going to that game? I mean,
Yeah, absolutely.
okay.
One of the weird things is none of the West Coast teams are playing in any of those bad weather places at that point of the season.
Yeah, I agree. It's important, especially for James at this point in his tenure, because he's the common thread over this last decade, and if not now, when? I mean, you got a veteran quarterback. You got good running backs. Abdul Carter. Your top players are upperclassmen, maybe even gone after this year. So important game.
And then obviously it's going to be a noon kickoff, which some people seem to be unhappy about that, because I think we kind of assumed this was the most likely scenario when they elected to make Washington the whiteout.
Well, listen, do you want all these games on big-time national TV or don't you? And if that's what you're going for, if you're going for the money, look at how many games Penn State's been on Fox, CBS, NBC this year. If you want that happening every week or every other week, you're going to be beholden to the networks, and that's what the Big Ten's chosen to do. I'm not saying it's right. I'm not saying it's wrong. I think if you're a Penn State fan, it sucks that this thing isn't a night game. I mean, it's
or at least 3:30.
Or
if
a
I'm
whiteout.
the visiting team, I want to
Right.
play at noon. Please
Exactly.
make it at noon.
But
I want nothing to do with the 3:30 or
We're
the
in a
night game.
completely different college football era, and everybody's beholden to TV. And when you're making as much money from TV as they do, nothing you could do about it.
You don't want your games on the Access Channel.
Like
No,
this
that's where
show
we got
used to
our
be.
start.
And Tom, I think you brought up a good point. It probably helps the visiting team in these situations because you don't have the primetime atmosphere and the whole day of people being able to tailgate.
What are you
Exactly.
getting at tailgating?
Well, I've said that if I'm playing Penn State, I want them at noon. I want nothing to do with the 3, and I certainly don't want anything to do with that night game, because for some reason that crowd's just a little bit louder at night. I wonder why.
Well, they'll have to manage their rest this week. Penn State has a night game on Saturday night against Wisconsin, gets back here very late in the morning, and then Ohio State was at home for a noon start, done by 4 or 5 o'clock. So Ohio State had a 7 or 8 hour running start at least on Penn State for this week.
And obviously, we mentioned earlier, we don't know the status of Drew Allar, except it's got to be really bad for him to miss this game.
Well, I don't know. I mean, and that's where, listen, you could have your one game at a time mantra, but now that it's a different atmosphere with an expanded playoff, would you err on the side of caution with Drew Allar, where if this was a game that you absolutely had to win to get in, we see it in pro sports all the time where there's much more margin for error. Now there is more margin for error. So I'm not saying that they would ever put the kid at risk, but you may go the extra mile to make sure that he's ready for the playoff, as opposed to this one game, because you could actually afford to lose and still get into playoffs. So we're seeing it's a whole new dynamic. This stuff is all new and different in analyzing these games.
Well, here's the other thing too: is you definitely don't want Ohio State to know what's going on,
That's a
because
great
now
point.
the game plans you're going to have to put together. You don't know. You have to have a game plan for the other guy, no matter what. But how much, and how much time you're going to practice. So they're going to. This is going to be pretty tight to the vest until game time.
Well, that's where you don't know how it's going to play out with the Big Ten championship game. Because I'd say if he can go this week, you want to get him through this game, and then maybe there's a window to manage his time with these next 3 or 4 games. The last thing you want is him to get hurt in a Big Ten championship game, which in some ways would be nice for seeding, but you want him healthy for the playoff.
I'm telling you, it's a whole new dynamic.
Yeah.
And all this stuff, like now we're watching these games across the country, and Neil and I were driving around Illinois and Wisconsin getting lost along the way. But part of the discussion is who's been eliminated, who's still in. You're looking at Indiana. Now, wait, what if there's a 3-way tie in the Big Ten for first place? All these things are making it so much more fun to me.
Yeah.
It may not be the do or die aspect that we used to have, but so many teams are involved, and there's so many more ways of analyzing things.
And there's a realistic scenario that Penn State, Oregon, Ohio State, and Indiana are all 11-1 at
Right.
the end of the regular season.
How about a Penn State Pitt playoff?
Or how about Oregon, Indiana, and Penn State being undefeated? I mean, that would be wild,
Well,
wouldn't
then
it?
Ohio State would be out.
No,
Yeah.
yeah, exactly. But that's my point. It's all these things that we got to kind of wrap our heads around.
You brought Indiana into this mix, and that's one of the greatest. I think it's one of the great stories in college
PA
football
guy.
this year. What's going on?
Yeah.
And they're just doing a great job coaching down there right now. He really is. And they got it going, and the schedule looks like it's setting up well for them. But it's interesting because people will say, "Well, Penn State doesn't get a crack at them."
I wish
A lot
Cignati
more-
was just a little bit more outgoing and confident. I don't think we should. He's been fun to watch.
He has
He's been
been
real
Yeah,
fun.
a lot more meaningful games down the stretch in the Big Ten this year, which is great to see. Anyways, we have to take another break. When we come back, we're going to crown our Nitwit of the Week.
You're watching Nittany Nation Overtime.
Nitwit of the Week time, and Mark, you've moved into a 3-way tie with me and Neil with 2 wins this season.
kind of got lucky. I know Neil was rooting for a late score for Wisconsin, so he could be Nitwit of the Week, but somehow I snuck
Definitely. Congratulations, pal.
That's kind of how I was at Kent State. I was rooting for Penn State to not score that touchdown at the end, and when they did, Neil got the win.
Yeah. Meanwhile,
We put our priorities in place. Hey, so let's do our picks for Ohio State. I love the way Penn State's playing. I love the aggressiveness, the enthusiasm, the attitude. But I said it a couple years ago, I'm going to believe Penn State could beat this team when I see it. And I think everything's kind of there. I'm worried a little bit about Allar's situation. I know Pula played well, but I can't go with Penn State until I see James Franklin could get over this hump. I'm going to go Ohio State 27-24.
okay. I'm trying to do the math on the fly. Shouldn't be too
3
hard.
points.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I picked 3 losses at the beginning of the year, so I got to come up with one eventually. I do think they played better than I anticipated, but I'm going to go ahead and say same thing. They got to prove it. Hopefully, they can get over the hump. I'm going to say Ohio State 28, Penn State 23.
Yeah, I mean, both defenses are playing well, and we saw last year the defenses kind of stole the show in the game. I think it's going to be a little more low scoring. I'm going to go Ohio State wins this one 24-17.
You're a very smart man. I'm going to go with you. That's exactly what I'm going to say. 24-17, Penn State.
All right.
It looks like the guest is going to have an excellent chance.
Tie the whole thing up,
What
Tommy.
do you get if you win that? Do you get any? Is there a Nitwit of the Week award, or what is it?
We should have
a
a roving
special-
trophy.
You're gonna get
special
a trophy
trophy.
or something?
Yeah, we
Like
should
a
have like a
special
yeah.
prize.
crown.
Yeah.
Sort of roving trophy would be nice. Except, yeah, I mean, close game. I mean, I think this is going to be a really exciting one.
Yeah, I think their special teams have to clean a few things up that weren't cleaned up at Wisconsin. And I'm curious what Kodal Nicky will come up. He's had 5 different guys took snaps last week. I'm curious what he's going to have in his bag of tricks this week. I would presume the same
Wait,
thing.
so I'm the only guy that picked Penn State.
That's right.
Yep, and you got to assume, you know, Trey Wallace even said after West Virginia, they're just scratching the surface on the creative things they have in the offense. So you got to assume they've got something ready for Ohio State.
Yeah, one other thing I'd say, I think their linebacker play has to be a little tighter. I know Rojas, it looks like he's dealing with a shoulder problem, but that's one area with the defense that I would be a little bit worried about going in against this sort of opponent. Let's see if those guys could tighten it up a little bit.
All right, guys, well, we're out of time.
Thank you,
This week on Nittany Nation Overtime. Tom, thank you so much for joining us. We'll be back next week after the Ohio State game.